Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today. This is the Storm Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Campaign hosted by the North Central Texas Council of Governments, as well as Civic Marketplace. We really appreciate you being here, especially given the timeframes that we are moving into with the late spring and early summer. My name is Craigan Johnson. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and I manage the TXShare Cooperative Purchasing Program. If you're not aware, cooperative purchasing programs exist because a public sector entity has performed a procurement already for a good or a service, and they make the contract leverageable by any other public sector entity or nonprofit serving in a governmental capacity. The benefit in this regard is that it allows you to access readily available contracts for goods, for services, that satisfy the procurement requirements so that you do not have to go out for a bid. You can leverage these products today and get services immediately, as opposed to spending weeks to months to potentially half a year before you're able to get your resources. Specifically, how that applies to today's conversation regards the unfortunate reality of disaster season that often takes place during the summer. As you know, the summer and into the early fall, this is when we experience hurricanes. This is when we experience wildfires. This is where we experience severe thunderstorms. In my location in Central Texas, only this last Sunday, we had a 22-minute straight golf ball sized hail event. So this is a reality that faces everyone, as I mentioned, from hurricanes on the East Coast to thunderstorms, floods, fires in the Central Valley, as well all up to California with any other particular situation that can occur. When a disaster breaks out, oftentimes you will find a community suffers from a breakdown of reaction times regarding how they respond. And what I mean by this is they have to have a plan to get cleanup in operation, to get rescue in operation, to get mitigation in operation. But depending on the scale of an emergency, sometimes the answers to that are not presently known. And unfortunately, preparedness does not necessarily equal technological solutions. A full plan has to be in place in order to properly respond. And what that involves is a full gambit of systems, suppliers, contracts, communications, and procurement pathways. Specifically, that last one is a piece that we want to address in this call today and provide you some resources that you can utilize to help enhance your own municipality's readiness. During an emergency, that is not the time to build a process from scratch or to be reactive. It's best to have an understood process that you're going to go about right away. But we also recognize at those times, there's a lot of confusion. It's a fog of war type situation in that you may be waiting for FEMA grant distribution. You may be expecting a disaster declaration from your local government. Unfortunately, the steps you take, depending on when those declarations are made, will impact how you procure services and goods during this emergency operation. You know, we see over the last couple of years, there's increasing challenges with larger storm events, compressed timelines, and higher expectations of the public. Once upon a time, this is the message that's disseminated to the community. It's pushed out through the local newspaper, through the local radio station, and that's that. But we live in the world of Twitter, and people who are thousands, hundreds, however many miles away from your location are suddenly now a critic of how you are responding to your regional disaster. So, the goals that we have for you today are to learn how to balance your agency's speed, compliance, accountability, and most importantly, how to maintain and keep that public trust. We're going to share with you today some practical guidance, operational lessons, some real world use cases from entities that have experienced disasters, actionable next steps, as well as some opportunities to hear from our vendors as to what they provide to you. So let's go back into this. Perhaps the biggest agency challenge that you'll find is procurement timing. And this is what I mentioned. Anyone who's on this call understands what's involved with public procurement and how it's traditionally one of the more onerous processes that we go through. The issue, of course, with the disaster is that, as I mentioned, if you're waiting for a FEMA grant, you're now going to have to be compliant with federal purchasing regulations. And if you're waiting for a disaster declaration, any actions you choose before that declaration technically are still adherent to existing procurement regulations that may be fallen upon you. I say all that to say a cooperative purchasing program and cooperative contracts that are already established today and readily available for your use takes the headache and takes the uncertainty out of all of this situation. These contracts are available for consumption today or tomorrow, depending on when you may need them. And they satisfy all state and federal purchasing requirements so that you can have that peace of mind knowing that your solution is covered and you're not going to be secondarily victimized in the event of an audit where they find your procurement process, was not allowable. Another concern with that also is supplier readiness. If you did have an emergency situation that impacted your entire community, it's entirely possible that your local vendor community is also a victim of that same emergency, and they may not be able to respond to your needs. So while you might have a contract in place, it's entirely possible that the vendor is incapable of responding. It would be highly beneficial to have access to contracts that were outside of your geographical region that still can serve and bring those resources back to you. The next pieces we'd like to discuss is coordination, communication breakdowns, and decision making under pressure. It's a little difficult to kind of extrapolate who is going to be in communication and what your communication capabilities are. Luckily, we do live in a world where we have the greatest communication options available to us ever in human history. But it still breaks down to the matter of, are your chief officers available? Are they potentially on vacation and away from the region? Are they unable to be reached? What is the response? What are the options that are available to the next available person in line? Can they keep the process moving? Can mitigation begin? We're going to have some examples for you today about how our services can actually efficiencies add efficiencies in that regard and provide you some backup in that regard. And ultimately, decision making under pressure. If you're experiencing a flood, if you're experiencing a wildfire, extreme storm situation, you've got direct, immediate responsibilities to your community and their families that you need to address. The last thing on your mind is, how is the state going to look at my procurement? Or how is the state going to consider how I went about getting, these services to be brought in? And we understand that those are requirements that we've built, but in response, I say we as in like the governmental sector, but in regards to stabilizing and securing life, that is your primary concern. And we don't want you to be mired in these kind of bureaucratic considerations that we believe the solutions founded by TXShare and Civic Marketplace can help alleviate those concerns and allow you to focus on what actually is important. And to that fact, common failures that often occur is, as I mentioned, delayed information or disconnected systems. Without understanding exactly what you've got, we do have some solutions that could be potentially available for you. We're going to talk about those specifically regarding early warning systems. We've mentioned frequently the procurement bottlenecks, and I can't stress this enough. You do not want to be considering getting quotes, issuing bids, X, Y, and or Z during an emergency or an immediately after emergency event. It could only be of benefit to you to utilize a contract that's readily available, as well as regulatorily compliant to help you and your citizens out. The next issue, of course, is the lack of pre-positioned suppliers. This goes back to what I was saying about if your vendor community is also impacted, they may not be able to respond to you in a way that you envisioned when you originally set that agreement up. It would be highly beneficial to you to know of a network of other contractual options, geographically not in your same area, but able to respond to your area, or within 24 to 48 hours, get you those critical products and services that you may need. Preparedness is typically a layered capability. You have to have your resilient communications. You have to have trusted suppliers or either aware of a network of trusted suppliers. You have to have a clean contractual method, depending on whatever it may be, FEMA, disaster, local, XYZ, procurement pathway to get your products, and you need interagency coordination. So obviously, fire, police, EMS, they all need to have the capability to communicate with each other and understand what the left hand and the right hand are doing at any given time to maximize recovery and any sort of rescue efforts that may be ongoing. And today's speakers, they all represent different parts of that ecosystem, and we're very happy to share them with you, as well as open up the opportunity for you to ask questions to potentially validate anything that you are curious about specific to your community, or on the other hand, just hypotheticals that you've considered and maybe how we can help alleviate those concerns for you. After that, we'll have open forum for questions, and we'd love to share more about what TXShare and Civic Marketplace can do with you regarding the availability of contracts that we have today. But right now, I'd like to introduce you to the first of our panelists, and I'm going to transition this to Mr. William Whitson of Kerr County, Texas. William, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate that. Just a little background on myself. I am a former city manager, assistant city manager, all-around local government guy. Served in Florida, states of Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and I'm also a former federal official with the U.S. EPA, both in headquarters Washington and in the field. So I understand government and procurement and disasters and all of those kinds of things. Currently, I'm working the EOC operations in Kerr County, Texas. This is the place where the horrible flash flood occurred last 4th of July that ended in the tragic loss of so many lives here in Central Texas. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. So all of this discussion is quite relevant to what we're doing and how we're going about our business. So as we approach storm season, I'm an old Gulf Coast guy, used to hurricanes and those kinds of extreme weather events. I'd like to just kind of cover a few experiences that definitely taught me that your best work in the emergency is done before the emergency. It's hard to think of everything, but it's much better in an emergency to play offense than defense. And if we had time, I could go into a lot of detail about what I mean by that. But I'm just going to hit a few highlight examples of some things that I've done in the past that have paid great dividends and moving me from the defense side to the offense side. Um, some of the things that I've got experience in doing, and I would recommend and suggest to others that are thinking about the storm season, is conducting pre-planning with local food distribution warehouses, making sure that you have those resources lined up. We also went and did contracts with for heavy equipment with local builders and contractors. Yes, they're out there building in your community, but they may have equipment that they would be in an emergency not going to be able to use that they would like to make money on. So it's a good technique to think about. I've deployed tiger dams in front of city facilities that were subject to flooding in low-lying areas and made arrangements to bring in shelving to raise things up off the floor so that those supplies and operations weren't ruined. Pre-ordered fuel tankers and refrigerator trucks. And also, some of my staff put mobile generators together. They actually had small generators that were adequate to power wastewater pumps, but they put them on wheels and were able to take them around at critical points of the emergency. So just a few things to think about. Also through mutual aid agreements, made arrangements with cities and communities outside our area to bring in traffic control devices. And believe me, all of these things added up to a much better response than if we would have just waited till the last minute. But today I'd like to kind of focus back on the situation that I'm in and the civic marketplace and the tools that they bring to the table. Having worked so many disasters, I can tell you some of these things that Mr. Johnson said are just so critical and valuable in an emergency situation. And some of the things that have done here in the Central Florida or Central Texas area in responding to this particular disaster, there was no flood warning system, zero. And so now we are having to build the flood warning system. But what is happening is we have camp season coming. And the disaster that happened last year happened during camp season. So there's tremendous pressure from the legislature and from the public and from the camps, who are a large part of the economy, to move quickly. And so, thanks to the procurement mechanisms that were offered through this service, the marketplace, we were able to meet some of these deadlines. We actually went from zero sirens, zero efforts in terms of a actual flood warning system, to we have sirens up and they're testing them, and they're going to be ready by next week. So that's lightning speed when it comes to government to go from 0 systems to ones that are up and functional. That's our number one issue. It was the number one thing that we identified in the long-term recovery operation that we had to have is we had to come out of this disaster with a true flood warning system, something that's layered, something that's flexible, something that is functional, and that we can begin to deploy rapidly to help assure the public that it's safer here this year than it was last year. To be acceptable, this plan and series of actions had to be built quickly, as I had mentioned. And so I'm going to give you the 10,000-foot view. I'm not able to go into all the details at this point, but just real quickly, the system was built with 2 sources of public funds. One was the Texas Middle Mile Grant, which we actually utilized to help build tower locations and an electronic highway that uses technology, microwave technology, LTE technology, and other kind of communication technology, a combination of fiber to get messages from rain gauges, get data from stream flow data, to get weather data fed into a predictive model that would then begin to predict the flood building conditions in advance, because the whole key is to give people more time. In a flash flood, you may have minutes to make a life or death decision. So what we wanted to do was feed data quicker, faster, and more accurate into a predictive model that could then notify the public. We also then had to deploy the sirens, which would sound the alarm. And again, those alarms need to be sounded way before the disaster occurs. So trying to give people more time and get them to a position to make a life or death decision that was critical. And it wasn't for the civic marketplace pre-purchase, pre-identified resources, we would not have been able to meet this goal, and therefore the public would have been not very well served in this particular situation. So we are very thankful for this opportunity to talk about these things. Again, my experience has taught me many times: get it done before the disaster. Don't get into the fog, as Mr. Johnson said, and try to make these decisions. Make them early and do the best you can. We believe that we're building a layered flood warning system that is accurate and reliable. It depends on NOAA weather data, AccuWeather data, rain flow data, stream flow data, and it's going to integrate with other systems so that there's a common communication tool and a layered approach to how we warn the public that danger is imminent. So these are the kind of things we are able to accomplish, and we would not have been able to accomplish them had it not been for these mechanisms that we're sharing with you today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for that, Mr. Whitson. We are very proud to be working with you to get those resources stood up. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Brent Gambrill with Federal Signal. Brent, are you ready to take it away?
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay?
Very well.
All right, good. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by extending a sincere thank you to TXShare and Civic Marketplace for inviting me to join this forum. It's an honor to be here among leaders who are dedicated to safety and resilience in our communities. Again, my name is Brent Gambrill. I serve as the General Manager of Federal Signal Siren Systems business. But today I'd really want to talk more than just about siren equipment. I'd like to talk about readiness. And to kind of reinforce what William said, I can validate that the process from the point of Kerr County making their decisions on making the siren purchases and using the TXShare as their procurement vehicle greatly sped up the process. Right, I concur with them saying, in order to meet the timelines that were being given to us, if we had to go through a full traditional RFP process, I'm sure that they would not have been able to meet some of the deadlines that they're able to do. So that's the first point I'd like to make. Second, I like to touch on two areas of concern probably that people have in regards to siren systems. The first would be for those looking to install new siren systems and maybe what the start is to that process. And the second would be for those would have legacy siren systems and what concerns maybe and questions that you might have. So the first of those, if you're looking to install a new siren system, and I can't stress this enough, the first step is to have a sound map. Every community is unique, and you need to know exactly how sound behaves in your specific geography, considering terrain, wind patterns, building density. These are all concerns that need to be taken into place to make sure that every citizen is reached. The sound plan is the blueprint. It dictates the exact number of sirens and type of sirens that are needed for 100% coverage. Once you have created the sound map, the rest of the project flows from that critical piece of information. So here at Federal Signal, we don't just ship hardware. We assist you through these critical planning phases, whether you want to use your own local preferred vendors to do your installations, or you would like for Federal Signal to recommend factory trained, certified installation experts in your area. We're here to help you build that foundation of your siren system and make sure that it's solid. For those of you with existing siren systems, legacy systems, let's talk about the why behind maintenance. To ensure your sirens are ready, we recommend two different layers of testing. The first is using a daily silent test. This is like checking the pulse of your system. These are automated and ensure that the analog radio signals or communication channels are active. This ensures that when you hit the button, the connection is already there. The second step would be to do your full monthly functional test. This is your test drive. It provides concrete feedback on the mechanical performance and identifies any immediate repairs needed. If your testing in either of these phases reveals an issue, you've bought yourself the most important thing possible, which is time to get these things fixed before the next storm hits. The last thing I'd like to touch on is just the human element of why sirens still matter. Some of you may be on the fence about the need for outdoor sirens in the age of smartphones. And let me just give you some insight from someone who takes some of these calls after disaster strikes. Modern technology is certainly incredible, but sirens are designed to do something a phone cannot. They break through the noise. The sirens are immediate. They provide an urgent audible warning that is impossible to ignore, prompting people to seek shelter first and look for details second. They're redundant, right? So when cellular networks are overloaded or power goes out, sirens are independent systems that work with battery backup and solar regeneration on those batteries. So they work when the grid doesn't. Sirens reach people in areas maybe that they don't have technology available, right? At parks, maybe on golf courses, hiking trails, places where people don't have access to a phone or TV. And the last thing is, sirens provide clarity. So modern electronic sirens don't just give a whale sign. They also have the ability to give clear, audible directions for what happens next. In closing, whether you're building a new system from scratch or maintaining a legacy system, our shared goal is the same: to ensure that when the time comes, all systems are go. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you so much for that, Brent. That's very insightful. And we've heard it from many of these Central Texas communities. I myself am in San Saba County right now. How those that had them wish they had more, and those that didn't have them at all absolutely wish that they did have them. So I appreciate your input today. I'd like to take the time now to introduce Mr. James Logan, who's with AEM and their subsidiary One Rain.
Hello, everybody. My name is James Logan. As he mentioned, I'm with AEM. So I personally have experience designing and implementing more than 250 flood early warning systems across the U.S. and internationally, both both sort of at the city and county levels, but also at the national level. I've implemented systems, so I have a lot of experience. AEM is a company that specializes in disaster risk reduction for agencies that are managing flood, wildfires, and severe weather risks. So that's, our company specializes in that, and my focus is the flood side of that part of our business. So we serve most major cities across the U.S. with our stuff, especially across Texas. Almost all the major cities like Houston, Austin, Fort Worth, San Antonio. We do their flood warning systems. And across the U.S., we probably do 70 to 75% of all the flood warning systems across the U.S. So that's, the U.S. is probably one of our biggest markets for the flood work that we do. So our mission is to help agencies get ahead of disasters through integrated end-to-end solutions, not just some of the pieces, but actually putting it all together and making sure that the system works. And so that's our responsibility here. So what are the problems that most agencies struggle with? Integration is a big one, which is when if you can buy a lot of pieces because people sort of know the pieces they need or some of the pieces, but we specialize in making sure that all the pieces are there and they all work together, so that our responsibility is a working system. So these the chances are, when you put things together, the kinds of problems that you can run into when you have things that are sort of spread across different vendors is you don't really know who's responsible for making it work, and sometimes the vendors don't know whether it's their problem or the other vendor's problem, and usually they point fingers because they don't think it's their problem. And those are the things that you sort of need a good integrator to help you get through and make sure everything works together. Some of the common challenges that we run into is that yes, there's a chance when these things are put together, if they're not fully integrated, that the system may not work the way you expect, or it may not pick up early warnings when you want to. So these are all things that you have to think about when you do it. You want the system to work no matter what. The challenges that we address is that we sort of take responsibility for making the whole end-to-end system work. And so one of our major components is the software, but our job is making sure that all the pieces from the detecting the water levels in the river and the rainfall to flowing through to the modeling and forecasting, that all those pieces are working and the data is flowing throughout the system, so that your decision support people or decision people have all the information they have right in front of them, and that it's working at the time they need it. So part of this is making sure that there's regular testing on the systems. And also an important piece that everyone should remember is that when you put these systems in, they need to be maintained, because a system might work in the beginning, but over time things can break. Things happen over a period of time, and you want to make sure that the time you need it, the system is fully working and operational. So one of the things that sort of can makes the system important is that the procurement process that you go through, this thing, the reason that we're here supporting TXShare is that the ability to get a system, get it in place, get it working as fast, and knowing that it's all working together. I think TXShare makes that possible because they've already worked with all the vendors, worked through all the contracting processes and everything else, so that it makes the procurement process really easy, so that things can happen quick without having to go through a lot of red tape. So one of the reasons that these flood warning systems that we work on are so important is that right now the natural disasters are happening more often. The intensity of rainfall is higher, what we're seeing it's all over the country, but we're seeing that rainfall events are being more intense and more localized, which causes localized flash flooding, which is sort of different than big, like a big regional thing. But this localized flash flooding can be really dangerous because you can have intense rainfall and it can and cause flash flooding nearby. Being prepared for those types of things ahead of time is important because you can't really, if you don't have a system in place and it's not working, you can't really fix it if it's not working at the time the disaster happens. You want to have it there beforehand. So it's really important for your agencies to do the planning and get these systems in place and get them working so that you're ready to deal with the disasters before they happen. So our company, we through our software, we deliver by using that as sort of the integration point for all the different systems that are tied together. We provide dashboards and displays which help people understand what's going on, what's occurring in real time, what's going to be occurring because of the forecast information we bring in. We have direct connections to bring in all the weather service watches and warnings. We have direct integration with hydrologic models so that you can look at the forecast information and what's going to be happening, where the inundation is going to occur, what the timing of it is. All these things are things that we bring together with our software. So the other part about this is that when you're dealing with all these systems, when you're dealing with wanting to do the monitoring, and you're dealing with wanting to understand what what the current conditions are, what the forecast conditions are. With our software, you can see everything in one place. So you see the whole, the whole situation, and you don't have to go to one place to look at what the Weather Service has. You don't have to go to another place to look at what the USGS gauging stations are saying. Another system, you get it all together and brought together in dashboards so that you can make clear decisions with all the information at your fingertips. So that's sort of an important case of why we do what we do, is that we want to be able to allow people to make the best decisions possible and bring all the information to them so that they can make good decisions about when to activate evacuations, what roads to block, how to manage the current situation. So I guess in closing, I just want to sort of summarize what I've been talking about. So what you should do is you should assess your current systems, identify what your needs are so that you know what it is that you sort of need to add to your systems, and you can get help doing that from us and from other consulting firms. But let us help you put together the whole system so that you have an integrated system where it all works together. And that's really our big value that we bring to people, is that we can put all these pieces together and make a comprehensive working system that combines information from lots of sources, but brings it to one place for you. So you really just have to look at one set of screens and not go to a bunch of different places to look at things. So just hopefully get ready before the disaster comes and hits you, and we're here to help you do that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, James. And I would like for everyone to recall that it wasn't that long ago, and many entities may still be doing this today, where they were only able to really rely on the data from their own proprietary gauges for flood modeling. So you had a limited data set, and there's really something to the predictive modeling software that AEM provides, because it can extrapolate so many sources of data and interpret those far faster than any individual could. So the downstream effects, the preparedness, the awareness that it provides to you, it's kind of unreal how accurate it is and how beneficial it can be. So thank you for that, James. At this time, I'd like to introduce our final panelist for the day, Mr. Steve Mahlers with the Trilinks Corporation.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my name is Steve Mahlers. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Trilinks Systems, which provides the Novastar software solution for real-time environmental data monitoring and notifications. I'm going to be providing some general observations and specific examples for our products. Some of my observations agree with the previous speakers. So Novastar is often implemented as a flood warning system. And simply put, that means that we collect rain, water level, and other data, collect that with sensors, transmit over some communications channel, and to the warning system base station software like Novastar, and then analyze that data, provide visualizations and alerts and notifications, which you've heard multiple times. That's the basic system, but the devil is in the details, as usual. A little bit about the company. So TriLinks is a family-owned business based in Severance, Colorado, which is outside of Fort Collins. Fort Collins is about an hour north of Denver and is home to Colorado State University, which is where many of our staff study. They have a strong reputation in water-related degrees. And an interesting fact is that CSU and Texas State University are members of the new Pac-12. I don't know how that happened exactly, but if you're in Fort Collins and attending a football game or another event, look me up and maybe we can get together. So we were founded in 2015 when we purchased the software, and we've been enhancing it ever since. And personally, I have experience building flood forecast systems and also water supply modeling tools. We have implementations throughout the US and including Texas. So the history of our product and other products like it are usually built on some historical event. For us, one of those events was the Big Thompson Canyon flood outside of Estes Park, Colorado in 1976, so about 50 years ago. And that killed 144 people and was similar to the Kerr flood that Texas experienced last year. We also have had major floods in 1997 and 2013 in our area. And most of the systems are implemented in response to a major flood. So that might be a flooding on a wildfire area due to a thunderstorm, hurricane, or in California, they have atmospheric rivers which provide intense events. For our basin, we had a wildfire in 2020 that was the largest historical wildfire in the state, and that generated interest in a flood warning system. So unfortunately, many times these systems are implemented after the fact, but people do need to respond to the urgency and take those opportunities to use the funding and plan for putting in a system, because if you don't do it, you're going to be impacted in the future. And the purpose of this conversation is to discuss planning. I will agree with James Logan that we're seeing more frequent extreme events throughout the year and also at strange times of the year. So the seasonal aspect of rain is changing and other storms. And so unfortunately for emergency management, you have to be ready and aware all throughout the year because you don't know what type of an event is going to happen. And to that end, the Texas Water Development Board has been focusing on implementing new flood warning systems and using Senate Bill 3 funding, which focuses on installing monitoring stations and siren notification systems. They have published some guidelines on their website, which I would recommend that participants read. These systems involve engineering to design data collection networks and develop emergency response plans for specific communities. The systems also involve significant investment in data collection hardware and software with upfront costs, and has been mentioned the need for ongoing maintenance. It's important that communities understand the technologies that are used and the trade-offs for design, costs, and performance. So for example, the alert protocol, which is available in the flood warning industry, may have, which uses radio communications, may have higher upfront costs, but there are no ongoing costs to use the radio frequency, whereas cellular has ongoing costs and may not be reliable in all situations. And then satellite also has an ongoing cost. So it's important to weigh the pros and the cons of these solutions, and the guides that the Texas Water Development Board produced summarize that information. There are opportunities for communities to learn from existing implementations and the expertise from companies that provide products and services. For example, TriLinks is a member of the National Hydrologic Warning Council, and the Alert Users Group, which are two trade organizations that provide useful information, and they have workshops and conferences every year. Texas has 254 counties, which is 8% of the US. Go Texas, I guess. So there's many opportunities for collaboration, but also confusion, right? How do you line up what you're doing with your neighbor next door? So it's important to have those conversations up front, especially when you're thinking about upstream to downstream river flows and what the impacts might be. For our solutions, we try to be as transparent as possible, including providing products and services that allow data to be accessed by different solutions and organizations. And by doing that, our product can be used with data collection and notification products from different vendors. And after installing a system, it's important to receive ongoing training and to maintain support to make sure that the system performs well. That's been stated several times. For our software, there's different tools to configure and manage the data, view the data, and create information products that go out to decision makers. You're going to have to figure out who the different people are serving in different roles, because they have different responsibilities within an organization and in an emergency management situation. And we provide APIs that link to geographic information systems and models and things like that to support integration. In an event, it's important to have information from multiple sources, including the National Weather Service for their forecasts and watches and warnings, from the early warning system itself, and from siren and mass notification systems. By having those multiple data feeds, you have redundancy and can make sure that that information is going to get to everybody, because not everybody listens to the same sources of information. Flood warning systems can also provide a communication backbone that can be used to collect and share other environmental data. So the initial investment in the flood warning system can be done in a way to allow for expansion later. The initial funding may not include implementation of desirable features such as roadway flashers for low water crossings or cameras, so it's necessary to plan how those features might be added in the future. So for example, we worked with Hayes County and the city of Dallas to implement flooded roadway flasher systems, which are different for each community. It's also important to review system performance, as has been mentioned, and test appropriately so that points of failure can be understood and avoided during an actual event. For example, we've developed with the Mile High Flood District in Denver a tabletop simulation capability so that they can run through a simulation with emergency management staff and test the decisions that would occur in different situations. Another challenge that's, there are specific challenges to Texas. For example, you have fire ants that are attracted to electric current, so they can get into your equipment and mess with your sensors and short things out. So there's always some local twist when you're implementing these systems. So appreciate the chance to present that, and I look forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mailers. And I think it's important to notice that this solution isn't just predictive; it's also reactive. It doesn't require the human input to say activate a siren or to activate the flashers at a low water crossing. What is it they say? When seconds count, people are only a few minutes away. This takes that kind of consideration out of the equation. So thank you all, panelists, for participating today. We would like to turn this over to questions at this point. And at the moment, no questions have actually been submitted by the attendees. So maybe I've observed that oftentimes when discussion starts, just discussion naturally begets more discussion. So I'll open this up to see if this activates any communication. But what for the participants, what's the biggest mistake that agencies make before a storm, or even the panelists, if you'd like to answer from your own experience?
I have an answer because I've run across it in a couple situations, but I ran across an agency that they had a flood come in. The flood warning computer was in the corner and it had a cloth draped over it and it was powered off. And they basically just wasn't active because they hadn't had a flood in a long time. They moved it because it was in a room where they had a like a potluck or something, and they used the table and the system wasn't working. And so the thing that's most important, or one of the most important things that you can do, is always make sure the system is working, and it should be sort of a priority um, to know that the system is up and running and working. So in some cases, the way to do that is to sort of have a heartbeat for the system and alarm off that heartbeat. If that heartbeat ever stops, send out text messages saying the flood warning system is not working, and warn people. But it's one of the kinds of things you could do to try to ensure that that doesn't happen to you, because not, there were a lot of problems with that because the agency was, I mean, actually, to some extent, they were negligent because they turned the system off and nobody made sure it was on. But also, there was not a heartbeat mechanism and a test for the heartbeat to make sure that it was alive. So that's something to think about for all of you, that whatever systems you do put in, try to have some way of monitoring whether that system is running, and if it's not running, be able to also send alarms, text messages to the people who could do something about it to make sure it's working.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think what James is suggesting is a good best practice, which is you need to monitor your system, which is monitoring data for emergencies, right? So there's like two kinds of monitoring that we do. One to make sure the system is healthy, and the other is the actual data. And I will point out a challenge, which is that we're all getting overloaded with email and texts and other kind of information. And so even when you have a system that things are turned on and you get these notifications, it's easy to tune it out just because of the overload. And we're all, I think, kind of facing that challenge. And then there's just basic challenges like in the Western United States, it may not rain for a long time and people forget about the system. They don't go look at it. And is it working when they need it to? Again, you have to have things in place to check it, to make sure that it's working. And that can be complicated by staffing changes at organizations. So you may have a person who was responsible for the system and they retire or something changes. So you really have to make sure that people have roles that they are responsible for connecting to the system and watching it. It can't all be automated in computers. There's still a human element that's involved.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in with a few quick things. We here in our situation, building it basically from scratch, is we realized it's built in pieces, and each piece has to integrate with the next one. So the first piece was the transmission of data from these remote areas. People come here because it's remote. And think about the irony of that. You want to go somewhere and turn off your cell phone, but then when an emergency situation happens, you really need it. So we've had to figure out, okay, how do we get data from these remote areas into the central prediction model? Then we have to build the model. Then we have to kind of figure out, okay, who is going to get that message and when, and what are the emergency management protocols? And then, of course, the public education. So each of the systems are built in pieces, but they connect to each other. And then, of course, we have three different river authorities working together in this disaster. The amount of intergovernmental coordination is unprecedented, in my opinion. So those are the kind of things that you need to look for: is how do the pieces, which ones are come first, second, third, but how do they integrate, and how does that fit into the larger picture?
Thank you all for that. So let's flip the script a little bit. Instead of thinking about what do agencies miss before the storm, what actually breaks during an event?
Power, electrical power. We have dual backups on our equipment systems, both solar and regular hardwire. And then again, you just got to think of all the different layers, cell phone communications going down and how you overcome that challenge. So that's been my experience is, basically electrical power and communications are two of the most essential items to running a disaster, but yet they are among the most vulnerable.
Yes, yeah. So adding to that, what I'd like to say is that because we run into this a lot, the so cell phone networks themselves are if you have long extended power outages, usually they have some type of battery backup system or generator, but that only lasts for a certain amount of time during, especially during major hurricane events or things that
Yep.
take a lot longer to get through. And so those networks are not reliable during emergencies. So when your system gets built, what you want to do is you might still use those capabilities, but you have to have a backup way of doing the same thing. And so you want either stuff that a different way of doing things that's not dependent on local infrastructure that might go down. And so things to think about, one is, we talked a little bit about this alert protocol, which is like a terrestrial radio protocol for getting data across. Satellites are also another viable option because satellites are their infrastructure is somewhere else. They're way up in the sky and their downlinks are somewhere else. And so they don't have dependencies on local bad weather. So those systems tend to stay working even during times when there's outages. And you also have to look at which satellite provider you work with, whether some frequencies they work in, you can't get the data through when there's a heavy cloud cover and heavy rainfall. So you want it to be something that works when the weather's bad too. So there's sort of like a whole thought process of going through your whole system, evaluating all the single points of failure, and then deciding how can I add redundancy to that single point of failure. And you have to do that almost every year, relook at your system and do that again because you never want to have a single point of failure in your system during an emergency. So that it should be part of your normal process to identify those places and then make changes to remove those single points of failure, and then you have a much better chance of making it through a big event and still being able to understand what's going on and make good decisions about how to support the people and save lives during those events if you think about it that way.
Yeah, I would just add that it's two parts. One is relying on industry expertise and what we've learned over the years to implement things as best we can up front, and then learn from experience because every system is going to behave differently, whether it's communication breakdowns because of cellular networks or other things that you have to compensate for. So even if you think you have it all right, things are still going to break, and you have to respond to that after the event and improve your system.
Thank you for that. We've got a question from an attendee that says, oftentimes it is difficult to get buy-in for redundancy for the purposes ensuring coverage for necessary human components, or even power, as you're discussing now. What have you found to be a successful in reaching larger understanding and value of preparing for disasters?
What I think one of the best things is when you can give real world examples where lack of redundancy caused a problem somewhere. And so, I mean, there are places, in North Carolina when a hurricane, the most recent hurricane hit North Carolina, they lost all comms, all their satellite or cell phone towers went out through the mountainous areas of North Carolina, and they couldn't get access or even talk to people to get people to give them instructions on what to do because none of their cell phones worked in the area. And so basically people were isolated. There was no communication. I mean, when you can bring real examples of where failures actually had a bad impact and where redundancy would have solved the problem, or adding generators, or the different things you can do to add resiliency to your system. When you can give those real world examples, then you ask them, do you want that happening to us? Do you want that happening to you? And where you live, and that's a more convincing argument than just asking for redundancy by itself. You need to show them the consequences of not doing it, and how it impacted other places in a bad way. Because there are lots of examples, because unfortunately disasters happen a lot and they happen all over the place. And there are cases where some agencies make it through those because they're doing the right things. And there's cases where they've had big failures because they didn't take that into account. And those failure examples are ways to convince people that are decision makers or that have money on why it's so important to do it.
James, I totally agree. You got to show them the why, and you give them the specific examples. And I have a whole long list of them. And ask them the question: do you want to be that person? Do you want to be the person that tried to save 5% and then had your whole system go down when it was really the most urgent and lives were lost? No, I don't think I want to be in that position.
I'd go back to Rosie. I would go back to if it's a siren system, there's ways that you can set up automatic polling and testing that'll quickly, like when you look at the reports over time, you'll see that if you don't have a redundant channel, there was times where it missed. And so when you're talking about a 24/7 need, if you just have the data and the data is right there, most likely in your siren system through reports that's showing you if you don't have that redundant form of communication, there's times where it's down. And also on the power situation, right? So if you've got a situation where you're relying only on battery power for 30 minutes of time with AC source to repower those, and the power grid goes down and you don't have solar backup on your sirens, again, those reports are going to show those times where, hey, our siren was down as long as the power was out for our area versus the sirens that had that redundant solar backup or wind backup to repower it. Those siren systems got backup. So I would say discipline in testing and then looking at your reports afterward will give you the data that you need.
Yeah, and the relative cost of buying a second computer that can be a redundant data management server, the relative cost of that is pretty low when you look at the hourly rate of what a person has to be paid and fixing a problem that is, more severe because the entire system went down because of a lack of redundancy. So you're going to pay for it one way or the other. And if you pay for redundancy intelligently, it's going to be a lower cost in the big picture.
Steve, we had a customer that actually, because they set up on their phone, get an alert every time their network went down because they wanted to go one CCU and not have a backup channel. It took about a week's worth of time of them kept getting reports saying you're down. Was like, you know what? I need to get this failover. So
Yeah.
annoyance was the reason why.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, what should agencies do in the next 30 to 60 days? Just overall, what should they do?
Start playing offense. You got to go through your systems. What is it that you deliver as a community, as a city, as a county, and think through the worst case scenarios and try to provide the backup that you need, and think ahead, because it's too late when you get in the middle of the disaster because supplies are limited, contract items become difficult. You've got to put these systems ahead, joining the marketplace and kind of going through some of the things you might need in an emergency, and getting those secured ahead of time is just your best medicine. You really have to think on the offense side and not the defense side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that sad to say, you don't want to waste a disaster. So there's funding now, there's some urgency, and you need to check your eligibility for that funding, what will be paid for, and think about, what does it mean for costs now versus maintaining it into the future, but putting some energy into that and start maybe having a plan to put a plan together, right? Maybe there's a level of planning that you need to do to get started.
Perfect.
And the only thing I'll add to that is I think that that there's some places where you may not have as much experience, for example, as William here has in emergency management, and ask and talk to other people that are doing this and basically get advice from neighboring agencies that you think they're doing it right. Talk to them and basically try to figure out, get ideas from them and get their support for what you're doing. Because the one thing that's true about the emergency management industry is that everyone is supportive of everybody else that's trying to do the same thing. And so there you can get a lot of good advice from agencies around you, from state level people that are helping other people do things. There's a lot of sources of information, and usually they're just people that are doing the same job that maybe you're responsible for, but they're nearby, and talk to them about it and learn what you can.
Thank you for that. And that's a great point in all of this, that the most logical next steps as we enter into the summer months is to be proactive, not reactive. And as we close this out, I would like to remind everyone of what the purpose of the TXShare Cooperative Purchasing Program is. We are a cooperative purchasing program organized by the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We are all ourselves public sector employees. And the contracts that we put together are not just done for the sake of having contracts. We recognize that there are other cooperatives that for your day-to-day services and uses have been around for decades. Every single contract that exists on TXShare was stood up because either a city, county, school district, what have you, either asked for it explicitly, or they said there's a dearth in the availability, and this is really a system that should be made available for the public sector. So all the contracts we put together, we did on your behalf. When a public sector entity needs something, chances are their neighbors need that exact same solution. So we like to feel that all of our contracts have a prescient need available to you by you. And with that, I'd like to remind you of two separate things. Is that one, these services are available to you today. You don't have to procure them. The cooperative purchasing program satisfies the procurement. What that means is that we have already done it, and you are able to leverage our master services agreement with firms such as these today. And that is both state of Texas compliant as well as compliant with 2 CFR 200, the federal regulations. So the funding source, if it comes from, say, EPA, you are still able to utilize these services. And second, of course, if you are aware of a resource, of a product or a service that either is not on a cooperative today, or it is, but it's not represented in the capacity that you would like for it to be, please feel free to reach out to the TXShare group, discuss with us if this is a potential need that could be a solution for the public sector, and we will take the procurement on your behalf. We will do the heavy lifting. You can help us as a subject matter expert. You can help us develop the scope of services. You can serve as an evaluator. You'll still have hands-on effort, but the actual procurement process itself, the public notice, the drafting of documents, the evaluation, and of course, taking it before the executive board, we will do that for you, because ultimately the contract will be a benefit not only to you, but to your neighbor entities as well. NIGP stated that I think a procurement from inception to contract takes approximately 500 staff hours. And effectively what we're saying is we'd like to take that 500-hour project of yours, allow you to get back to what you do on the day-to-day. We'll take the remaining 498 hours, and then we'll make sure that you have a best-in-class contract available for you. So, gentlemen of the panel, I really appreciate your being here today. I know the audience appreciates hearing your insights. This will be recorded and provided to any of those who have an interest in it. Thank you all so very much for joining us this Thursday afternoon. If there are any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of the emails on txshare.org, and we will make sure that they are either answered directly by us, or if they go to the panelists, they will get sifted to the appropriate entity. So once more, thank you for your attendance today. My name is Craigan Johnson, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.